Maggie will add some quilting, Mama spoke up. I'll help her, and her work will look fine. As the back door shut behind Ellie, Maggie bit her lip to keep from groaning, or worse, from spouting a cross retort. All she needed was to be the only one getting quilting lessons like a child. They were all skilled stitchers, and she wasn't. Since she could never measure up, she would always be inferior. No one seemed to care much about her other talents. Why, she was good at... What was she good at? As she sliced the bread, she searched in her mind for her accomplishments and came up quite blank. In school, she'd always been good at arithmetic, but no one cared if a girl was good at that. What else? She could ride, but so could Ellie. She could fish, but even Ellie could learn to fish if she put her mind to it. Let's face it, Maggie, you have no real talents. You are just a big lump. Ow! She cried suddenly. Because she hadn't been paying attention to her work, the knife came down and nicked her finger instead of the bread. She thrust her wounded finger into her mouth. Oh, Maggie, what have you done? Exclaimed Mama. Nothing, Maggie retorted angrily. I can't do anything. I'm just a lump. Her voice caught on the final word, and to her surprise, tears sprang to her eyes. Mama tore a strip from a clean rag and handed it to Maggie. Wrap this around it. Mama looked closely at her. What is it, Maggie? She said more gently. Maggie sniffed. Nothing. You've been out of sorts all day. What's troubling you? It's just what I said. Maggie's voice trembled over the words, but she just couldn't keep her feelings in any longer. I'm not good at anything. I'm a lump of plain nothingness. Mama took Maggie's injured hand and examined the cut finger. It was still bleeding a little. She wrapped the piece of cloth around it. Surely you can't believe that, Mama said. I dare you to name one thing I can do. Well, you are good at arguing. Maggie grimaced at that. Mama smiled. You are young, dear. You will find your niche in life, I promise. She put her arm around Maggie. You said you are a lump. Well, that doesn't have to be a bad thing, you know. It's like the lump of dough that made this bread. It starts out as not much, but before you know it, it turns into this wonderful bread. I can't even make bread, Maggie groused. You know what I mean, though, don't you? You are a late bloomer, Maggie, but you will bloom. I believe it with all my heart. You will bloom into a beautiful flower. I'm 18, Mama. That's kind of old to be a bud. Maggie dashed a hand across her eyes to wipe the tears still dripping. Mama took a handkerchief from her apron pocket and gave it to Maggie. Maggie wiped her eyes and blew her nose. Mama was about to say more when Ellie called from outside. Mrs. Donnelly and Mrs. Reynolds are here. Mama hesitated, clearly torn between her duties as hostess and her need to comfort her daughter. Go on, Mama, Maggie said. I'll be okay. We'll talk more later, all right? Maggie nodded. Mama went outside and Maggie returned her attention to the task at hand. She tried hard not to think glum thoughts for the rest of the day, but that proved almost impossible because every little thing seemed to conspire against her efforts. Right off, she was reminded of another reason for her melancholy when she glanced out the kitchen window and saw Mrs. Donnelly. Immediately, she thought of the woman's son, poor Tommy Donnelly, languishing away in the St. Helens jail. He was never far from her thoughts, not only because he was her friend, but also because she held a secret that could, if revealed, probably get him convicted of murder. A few weeks ago, Tommy's father had been found dead. Tommy had eventually confessed to shooting his cruel, good-for-nothing father. He said it was because he had feared for his own life. But shortly after the shooting, Tommy had made remarks to Maggie that could be construed as threats against his father's life. Zach had advised Maggie to keep quiet about these matters unless the sheriff asked her point blank. So far, no one had given her a second thought. But if there was a trial, she could be called, Zach had said, as a character witness. Then she would most likely have to reveal her secret. And that wasn't all. Maggie had not gone once to visit Tommy in jail. She felt terrible about it. She knew she was about his only friend, some friend. Maggie finished cutting the bread and went outside to join the quilters. Just then, Florence Parker arrived with her usual grand flourish, this time all excited about a letter just received from her son, Evan.